Okay, completely random story. First, I'm gonna read what I wrote in my journal, and then I'm gonna wax poetical for a while, just riffing. So, completely random story. Cousin Jeannie, whom I called Aunt Jeannie until I was 12, told me a story at my grandfather's funeral. Back when she was a baby, long before I was even a dream of a dream, my grandparents had a store over on the South End somewhere. While it's not a very long story, the story goes that Grandpa always used to put baby Jeannie in the banana box. That's it. I don't know why I love that so much, but that feels like Grandpa to me. That feels to me like the story of an immigrant family just getting their lives figured out, a little family, a little business, some laughter. That's the frame I like to view my grandfather through. Oh, wait, hold on. There's more. It's, no, not that one. Ah, fuck it. I lost it and it's gone forever. That story was brought to you by an episode of The Gilmore Girls where fucking Lorelai's, after the funeral with her father, she's given this horrible, terrible, awful, just atrocious story about her father because everyone's telling stories. And at my grandfather's funeral, it occurred to me for probably the first time that I didn't actually know the man. He was retired before I was born. Like, he had lived his life. He had fucking 8 kids of his own. He had 30 grandkids before I rolled around. There was like 42 before he died. There's, including the great grandkids, I don't know, there's like 50 of us or something. We're a big family. Like, he'd lived a life. He'd had a career. He'd had his own store. He did the railroad thing. And all of his kids, well, almost all of his kids were out of the house. That's a whole other story. So by the time I got around, I remember my grandpa from little glimpses of what, in my mind, he was always doing. He was always buttoned down in slacks, sitting out on his front porch, and I guess you'd call it the sunroom, smoking a cigarette, drinking his coffee, and reading his newspaper. It didn't matter if it was 8 in the morning or 5 at night. That was his life. That was where he hung out. That was what he did. That's where I remembered him. That's how I remembered him. Always. Button down, slacks. Man, never wore sweatpants. If you caught him wearing a wife beater, it was while he was getting dressed. Like he was a good dude. I want to say classy, but that's not the right word. He had his standards. And so anyways, funeral. I asked kind of everybody, like, hey, what's your, like, you got a good story about him, something you remembered. Who was he to you? Because honestly, I didn't know him, and it feels shitty because, like, hey, that's your grandpa. He's kind of important. He's a big figure in your world, but he's like a god. He's way up on the mountain. You don't know him directly. You pray to somebody else, and they send the things up, and occasionally you get new shoes, that kind of thing. So that was the story that just, I fucking loved that story. I tell that story, but I've got one other that is, let's start with my favorite story. My favorite story is actually mine. This is a memory I have of my grandfather. I was a little kid and I was angry for no reason, like kids are. When you know why you're angry, you're not angry very long. You get it out and you cry and you yell and you and tell people what you need. But you're a kid and sometimes you're just frustrated. The hormones are going or you're confused or whatever. And so you're just... And so with that, I was at some family event. We used to get together for all the Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, fucking 4th of July, all the big holidays. Whole family got together. All fucking like 40 people in my grandparents' house. It was great. But I was just pissed off at life. And she's trying to make me feel better and trying to get me to calm down. But it's just not working. And we've got to go. With the food's here and people are waiting. And so we go. And I'm just sitting there in a corner just stewing. Just grumble. And my grandpa comes over and he says, "Ay, mijo. What's wrong? Who made you mad? Who upset you? Was it your mom? You know she's still my daughter. I'll spank her." And me, as a little kid, I'm like, what? So he says it again. He says, she's still my daughter. She's never too old for us spanking. He takes my mom. Like, I didn't, like, tell him, yeah, do it. He takes my mom into the corner. He puts her over his knee, and he just starts spanking her. And now, mind you, she's 40 years old at this point. Like, I'm one of her youngest, okay? She's a grown-ass woman. He's an old man. But he's just got her over his knee, and he's spanking her. And I'm just laughing. It is the best fucking... That was... Oh, God. I don't know what I was angry about, but I know it stopped. Like, the rest of the day, I was just like, ha, 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 ha. And, still thinking about it right now. Just fucking hilarious. And so that's my absolute favorite story about my grandpa. That's my grandpa. There is one other I have, and I can't for the life of me think of it. I love the banana box story. I love that. Oh, that's it. My grandpa used to tell this story. I've never heard it in its entirety. The part of it I know, and to be frank, I love that it's the only part of it I know, and that I'm sure I'm missing pieces, is he used to tell people boisterously that when him and my grandma were kids, you know, teenagers, whatever, and they started dating, he used to throw his baloney over the fence to try and catch her. As I understand it, that is his phrasing that he likes to use. He would throw his baloney over the fence to try and catch her. I, to this day, have no fucking clue what that means, but I love it. Just the imagery of that. Like, wait, is this a euphemism for, like, a glory hole kind of thing? Is this like, wait, she was super poor, and so literally you, like, lured her over with a sandwich? Is this some creepy pedophile thing? Like, what's going on there? Is this some, like... is this a euphemism that in the Spanish it means something totally else and everyone knows what that means, but over here we're like, the baloney over the fence? Oh, that old chestnut. Everyone knows that story about throwing your baloney over a fence to get a woman to fall in love and marry you. Oh, that old tale. So he'd throw his baloney over the fence to try and catch her. It's like a fishing kind of symbolism, you know. I don't know. So that's my ranting and riffing, and that's my stories about my grandpa. And yeah, this is something I've been saying I want to work on. A couple of you who might hopefully watch this know I want to try and recite a couple of little stories, read some short stories that I loved and that really stood out to me, some old magazine articles and poems and things I've written and stuff like that. And so this is kind of practice, and, you know, I'll watch it and maybe I'll put up a new one, or maybe I'll just leave it for posterity and whatever. But yeah, we're going on like 8.5 minutes. I'm going to let this go. Oh, this is June the 1st, by the way, about 5 p.m.